Hello.
Hello. I got you, Sammy.
Good, thank you.
I'm really embarrassed. I need, okay, here we see. There's Stephanie. Hi, Larry.
There I am.
Hi, Stephanie.
Hey.
Can somebody look up Clyde Bardsley's email address? I don't know what it is. I need to send him an invite.
Who's that?
Clyde Bardsley.
Just a minute.
You have it in your database? I don't.
If you sent one to him, an invitation previously, I could look it up there, I guess. Let's see.
No, I blind copied people I sent it to who are not board members.
Okay, I have
Right.
it. Are you ready?
Yeah.
It's V as in Victor Bargsley at sbcglobal.net.
That's BARGSLEY at SBC. Okay.
Yes.
It may take a second, folks, and I'll send that out to him. It's so embarrassing. I got so many screens open.
Also, just so you know, I never had to put any password in.
No, I had that turned
No.
off.
Okay.
B Bargsley at SBCGLEAL dot. I had that as an email address for many years. SBC Global. All right, now I've sent them an invite.
Hey, Sammy, I love your built-ins behind you.
Thank you. I never know how much people can see.
No, it's gorgeous. Actually, I have something similar, but I made it myself. It's like filing cabinets and a big, long piece of board across them.
Stephanie, if I made it myself, you would not want to see it.
I would love to have someone come in and put in cabinets like that. It's gorgeous.
Thank you. Hi, Kathy Ritterhouse. I haven't seen Kathy in forever.
Last time we only had Kathy by voice.
I had actually muted that too, and I don't plan on keeping my face up there.
So during the presentation, this is what you're going to see of me. That way you don't see me like looking at one screen and the other and back and forth, and that would be distracting.
Do I see Sarah over there? Trying to be incognito or something.
I told her while I'm giving the presentation, she's not allowed to talk. She always has something to add.
You can't just mute her, can you?
No.
Yeah, nice try.
Yeah. She's usually in the back of the room while I'm giving a presentation and popping up with little tidbits of her own. And I'm always giving her the look.
Somebody give me Brian Bingham's email address. It's not popping up here.
Okay, let's see. Bingham. Let me see. Bingham is. It's not popping up for me either. Maybe it's in this one. There we go. Brian Bingham. It's brian.bingham@live.com. Obviously, that's his personal one and not his work one.
Yeah, I think he did join by his personal one. I'm just sending those were two people who were there who I did not. I mean, Zoom didn't pick up Zoom keeps the email addresses that I send invites out to unless I use blind copy. And most of the invites I sent out were to the membership, and I didn't want the membership list out there, you know, with all their email addresses, so I used blind copy. I think that's what I'm doing. I used to think I knew what I was doing until this meeting.
What about Bonnie Cochran? Did you invite her?
Oh yeah, I sent it to her.
And then what about Carolyn, the person that has emailed us a couple of times in the last few minutes?
Aruba? Yeah, I sent her that.
Okay.
Carol Grant, excuse me.
No, this is
Hi,
Carolyn.
Sally. I haven't seen you for a long time. And hi, Verna and Clyde. Good to see you guys.
Good to see you.
Hi, Kathy. Had to unmute.
Yeah.
Hey,
Yeah, I'm
John,
gonna mute in a minute after I say hi to everybody.
John, I'm referring to the lady that her email address is carolyn.grace@txrr.com.
That's the one I sent. I did include her, definitely.
Okay, good.
I don't
Because
know
she
why
actually
Zoom,
just sent me
when
another
I
one.
send a Zoom invite through the Zoom function, it doesn't remember everybody that had previously been with me, and I thought it did. It didn't pick her up, and it didn't pick up Brian or Clyde and Verna.
No, we're here.
Yep, they're there.
We're back. It took a while, but we're back.
I should have told everybody it would be 20 minutes.
That's right.
Because
Right.
when I get into a technology fluster, it's
I could feel your pain, John, during that.
I tested it with family, and sure enough, as soon as we reached a certain number of people, the 40-minute clock went into effect, and I have obviously when this is done, I'm going to be contacting the Zoom people.
We believe you.
I was just glad it was you, not me.
Me too.
Isn't that the truth?
So this morning, John and I were testing it, and it kept freezing, and it was only for like a brief second. And then I thought John was saying, oh, it's probably mine. I've got too many programs open. I'll shut down my programs. Well, then I get an email from our IT department that there's actually solar winds occurring right now that's causing net connection issues across the United States. So.
I don't believe it. I think it's AT&T.
I
Well,
know.
hopefully you're right, because I plugged in my little Verizon MiFi, and so I'm working off it now instead of my Uverse.
Oh my God.
There must be solar winds every day, according to Uverse.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Can't see you.
Are you sure?
Our solar winds.
Watch.
I've heard of that before.
Watch.
I don't want one.
Hi, Barbara.
What are solar winds? I've never heard of that term before.
Oh, you haven't? Oh.
Good question.
Winds on the sun that are so great that they send rays down to us and mess up our. Didn't used to be a problem before we had all that stuff up, like satellites and everything.
Okay, so Brian says camera and mic are not working, but he's here listening.
Lurking, are you, Brian?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and start muting people so we can turn the thing over to Stephanie.
One more question. Are you sure you've invited Bonnie?
Yeah,
She didn't come back,
I
did
invited
she?
Bonnie and John. Let me
Well,
double check.
I got a text from her that says that she was texting you now. So I just didn't know if her email had gone through.
I didn't get a text from Bonnie.
Also, Jim Parker is not on yet either.
Are you sure there's James's
Unless
iPad?
that's James' iPad. I'm sorry.
That's
Yeah,
Jim.
that's
That'd be him.
what it is.
Yeah.
Sorry, Jim.
Oh, here's John Cochran joining us, so that's probably Bonnie. That's weird. Bonnie.
That looks like Bonnie.
Got it.
Yay. Hi, Bonnie. Hi, John.
Hello.
Yeah, Bonnie, it's identifying you as John.
We're on his laptop. I forwarded the second email Zoom to him.
Okay.
He has a bigger screen.
Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and turn the,
Back there. Hi, Barbara. Barb Wiley. I see
Oh,
her
yeah.
behind your.
yeah, Barbara, they can see your face behind you. Yeah, I
We're
turned,
waving at her.
she
That's
promised to
John's
sit
hand.
behind me on the condition that you would not see her.
Oh, sorry.
I moved the laptop. Well, I suspect my blood pressure is not, it wouldn't be good for my doctor to take my blood pressure today, and I really apologize. It's gonna take, if everybody except Stephanie would please mute yourself, I'd appreciate it.
Quickly, do we have Brian Bingham?
Yes.
Yeah, he texted that he's watching or listening.
Okay. All right,
Listening.
I'm muting us.
Okay, Stephanie, go ahead. Do I have to
Did you want to start with announcements? You had mentioned that earlier.
Okay, yeah, and we've got a couple of people we didn't have earlier. The board later this month will be considering how we go about reopening the museum. So I don't have any really current information beyond the fact that we're still shut down. It's Bonnie's birthday. Happy birthday, Bonnie.
Happy birthday.
And that's about it. I miss everybody. That was the first thing I was going to say. We're gonna be proposing some more get-togethers, especially among some of the PCS volunteers and that kind of group. But I hope everybody is handling this coronavirus satisfactorily. Is there anybody that has actually encountered the virus in their family? Juanita, do you have? Okay. Well, prayers with you. Okay. Let me unmute you. Go ahead. Juanita?
What? What?
Somebody in your family has COVID?
Our son-in-law, who was a fireman in Hearst, contracted it.
Oh.
Tested positive for 71 days this week. He's clear.
Hey. All right.
I do have another friend, though, who was in the hospital over 30 days. John was not in the hospital. So we're pleased to hear the news of him.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Stephanie.
All right. Well, here we go.
It doesn't work.
So, nope, you haven't enabled me yet.
I gotta give you.
Give me rights. Okay, I'm the host now. Okay, so I can share my screen. And let's bring this up. Okay, can everyone see the, well, you won't be able to answer because I think you're all muted. So you should be able to see my Grand Prairie street names.
No, we're not seeing your screen.
You're not?
No.
Okay, let me close that back. Oh, it's because I had one more click to go. All right, so now you should be able to see my screen. Yes?
Got it.
Okay. All right, so actually I'm gonna need to move this over here so I can see my notes. There we go. All right, so first off, I want to thank everyone for joining our very first Zoom GPHO meeting. This is pretty exciting. This is history in the making itself, I think. And so I hope everyone understands some of our technology issues and we're all learning this together at the same time. And so, yeah, we're going to try and get through this. So I think everyone on the line knows who I am, but just in case there's anyone out there that's joined that doesn't, my name is Stephanie Marino and I'm a past president of the Grand Prairie Historic Organization, and I'm currently the director of the museum and the archivist. So before we get started, I just want to go over a couple of things. John has hopefully muted all your lines. but we know that you may have some comments or questions. So as I go through the presentation, you can either send a note in the chat section and John's going to moderate that, or if you're not on your computer, you're on the phone, you can just write down a comment. At the very end, we'll unmute everyone and you can ask any questions or make any comments that you may have regarding something I've said or something you've read. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. So how did this presentation come about? I've actually gave this presentation back in 2015, and I created it because while I was researching Delaware South several years ago, I noticed 3 street names that I actually recognized the name because they were named for people. There was W.E. Roberts, David Daniels, and Mose Jordan. And so it got me to thinking, I wonder how many other street names are named for people that have shaped the history of Grand Prairie into this awesome town that we've become, or should I say grand town that we've become today. So I contacted Dane Stovall. He is with the city of Grand Prairie, and he emailed me an Excel spreadsheet of all of the street names. So, and Dane is the supervisor of traffic operations, signs, and markings. The spreadsheet had 2,179 street names. Now, again, this is back in 2015. Of those 2,179 street names, there were 766 that were actually names and not numbers. So in meaning like Southwest 3rd or Northeast 2nd or something like that. So I just thought it was really interesting. So while I studied the list along with a Grand Prairie map, I realized that a lot of the communities and subdivisions had themes to them. And, you know, most cities probably have this too, and it's not uncommon, but I just thought it was really kind of interesting. So we're going to start out with the tree names. So most of these can be found in the northeast section of Grand Prairie near Burbank Gardens. And I'm going to read these for the benefit of the folks that are on the phone and can't see my screen. So we have street names like Mimosa, Walnut, Cottonwood, Ash, Willow, Pine, Birch, Oak, Hickory, and Rosewood. And some of these are some of the oldest streets in Grand Prairie. So you've probably driven down or even lived on some of these streets. So after the trees, we have flowers, another nod to nature here in Grand Prairie. Most of these, or if not all of them, can be found in the Racket Club subdivision. I'm not exactly sure what Racket Club has to do with flowers, other than they're just beautiful and I love them. But so some of the names of streets in the Racket Club subdivision are names like Lilac and Orchid, Rosebud, Daisy, Marigold, Lotus, Bluebonnet, Edelweiss, Columbine, and Periwinkle, which on a side note, Periwinkle is my favorite color in the Crayola crayon set. So just saying, a little bit of trivia there. So next we have cities. I mean, so Grand Prairie has given a nod to some of the other Texas cities here in our awesome state. And these can all be found in the Dalworth Park and the Delaware South neighborhoods. So you have cities like Dalworth and Fort Worth, Dallas, Houston, Galveston, El Paso, Beaumont, and even Burleson. And if you can see this little map that's on the screen, you were able to have really good eyesight. Right towards the bottom, there's even a Texas street, which is obviously state and not city. And right above that is Holland, but that's not for the country. That's actually for the man that developed Dalworth Park. So next, we have nationalities and countries. So these are found in International Estates subdivision. And ironically, A through E are actually nationalities, what you were called when you live in that certain country. And then F, G, and H are actual country names. So we have Australian, British, Canadian, Danish, and Egyptian. But then you can live in Finland, Greenland, or Honduras, or in this case, live on those streets, not in them. So, and when I was a child growing up, some of my best friends were in this neighborhood. So I loved going through this neighborhood. So then I think you can all figure out where this subdivision is with these street names. Grand Prairie has given a nod to our Indian neighbors. So in Indian Hills, you have these awesome Indian tribe names, but then you also have a couple of others that just give a nod to the Indian nations, like Wahoo and Arrowhead are things that you think of with Indians. Interesting, I was curious about Wahoo. I didn't know, I don't remember a Wahoo tribe. And so I Googled it, and Wahoo was actually a famous chief. I don't believe it was an Indian nation. It was the name of a chief, which ironically is also the logo for the Cleveland Indians. That logo is the image of Chief Wahoo. So in Indian Hill subdivision, you have Shawnee and Cherokee, Cimarron, Choctaw, Chicopee, Chickasaw, and Apache are all different tribes. And another little tidbit of history is from 2nd grade to 7th grade, this was my neighborhood. I lived in Indian Hills and loved living there. So next, the city has kind of a mystical side. They've given a nod to King Arthur and the King Arthur days. Ironically, all of these names can be found in Nottingham Estates, except King Arthur himself, and he's over there with all the nationalities. But in Nottingham Estates, you have names like Nottingham and Lancelot, Marion, Little John, Sir Guy, Camelot, Robin Hood, Sherwood, Prince John, and then the Round Table itself. Just no King Arthur. So then there's this little teeny subdivision that's over just west of George Bush and Hill Street area, and it's the Monts. And I don't know if there's actually, I looked and looked and looked and couldn't find that there was an actual subdivision name, but if there was, I would say it would be Calendar Court, which is the name of one of the streets. So you have Calendar Court, and you have January, February, March, April, and May. And then I assume that the developer became landlocked and ran out of space because there are no more months after May. So then Grand Prairie, in the naming of streets, decided to tip her hat to our military history. And all of these street names can be found on the former NAS Dallas base. You have Tuskegee, Kitty Hawk, Earhart, Beechcraft, Grumman, Lindbergh, Nimitz, Iwo Jima, MacArthur, Curtis, and Henley. Now, the Curtis, if you notice the spelling, has 2 S's at the end. That's not a man's first name. That's a nod to the Curtis Wright airstrip, which is over on modern day Carrier. And now there's the Curtis Wright subdivision that's there, the gated community for over 50, I believe, live in that neighborhood. So then from there, we have more military names. Avion Village is full of military names. Now, Avion Village, as you probably know, was built to alleviate the housing shortage during World War II aviation boom here in Grand Prairie. And the first house was built with very much media attention in May of 1941, and it was completed in the same day. One of the media outlets that covered this story was Time Magazine, of which we have a copy of that now. It's in our archives room. I just took it up there recently. And that's compliments of Tom Chenault. He found it online and purchased it and sent it to me. And I just took a box of things up there a couple of weeks ago, and it's in that box. So it'll get filed away, and it'll be on display at some point in one of our cases. So, but the first home, like I said, was built in under an hour, and the entire subdivision was completed in 100 days. And the Avion Village Mutual Housing Corporation bought the subdivision from the government in 1948, and it's still mutually owned by the residents who live there. But in Avion Village, you'll find North American, which, if we all know, was the name of the first aviation manufacturing site here in Grand Prairie, Vaught, Fairchild, Douglas, Wright, and Bird are some of the streets in Avion Village. So Grand Prairie from the beginning has been fascinated with their Texas legends. And this is evident not only in the naming of these streets, but also the beginnings of GPISD. When I was a kid growing up, all of the elementary schools were named for one of these heroes. Most of the names you've heard of, but there are two street names that's actually, one is the first name and one is the last name of an obscure hero named Tapley Holland. And I first heard of him when I was researching Dalworth Park. Now, the utopian city of Dalworth Park was the brainchild of Colonel Frank P. Holland. He was the owner of the Dalworth Realty Corporation. And I noticed on the Dallas County Appraisers District website, the abstract of land that he used to create Dalworth Park was called the Heirs of Tapley Holland. Now, at first, I figured he was a relative of Colonel Holland, but I was curious, who was Tapley and why did he have this land? So I Googled it, and as most researchers will find, you know, your first thought is not always the truth, and you'll learn after you do a little more digging. So I learned a really cool thing about who Tapley Holland was. And I'm going to read this little excerpts from something, an article called Line in the Sand by Mike Cox. And it's published on the TexasEscapes.com website. And I'm sure you'll all figure out what I'm talking about when I read this. It says, then with a flourish, Travis drew his sword and slowly marked a line in the dirt. I now want every man who is determined to stay here and die with me to cross this line. Young Tapley Holland made his decision quickly, proclaiming, I am ready to die for my country, as he jumped across the line. It's hard to picture it as a stampede. The men knew they were voting to die, but all but two of them walked the line. Co-commander Jim Bowie, lying sick on a cot, asked some of his men to carry him across. Only Louis Moses Rose, a French soldier of fortune, remained behind. So I started thinking, you know, okay, this made more questions in my head. Was Tapley Holland connected to Dalworth Park, the land that became Dalworth Park, that then became part of the city of Grand Prairie? And I started getting excited. Maybe he grew up here. Maybe this was his family's land. But then I learned that the men who fought and died at the Alamo their heirs were granted land grants. And they were scattered out all across the state, or actually the country at that point of Texas. So Tapley Holland, his heirs, probably had nothing to do with this land whatsoever. It was just a land grant that was in his name given to his heirs. And it was just a big coincidence that Colonel Frank Holland then obtained the land and then developed it into Dalworth Park. But within the Dalworth Park area and across the city of Grand Prairie, you're going to find streets with the name of Bonham, Austin, Crockett, Houston, Fannin, Travis, Tapley, Holland, and then Goodnight Trail, which has nothing to do with the Alamo, but it is a Texas legend. And think about this for the questions and answers at the end when we unmute everyone. I don't know where Goodnight Trail Street is in Grand Prairie, so if anyone knows, let me know at the end. So then we have a whole myriad of street names that are people's first names. And unknown to history, whoever these people are, they're immortalized with names on a street sign. I can only imagine that they were probably a name that the developer liked, or maybe one of their own family members, or even the name of someone that owned the land before it was developed. But I'm sure that it leaves a lot of people excited to see their own name up on a street sign. And I'm sure it's also to the chagrins of the city of Grand Prairie that a lot of people probably steal these signs and they're hanging in their garage or basement. So anyway, but there are street names like Mildred, Terry, Dorothy, Virginia, Doris, David, Christopher, Curtis with only one S, that's a man's first name, not Curtis with two S's like we discussed a moment ago, Damon, Brandon, Alice, Tiffany, Adam, Shelby, Debbie, Stephen, Mary Pat, Eric, Lindsay, Joy Diane, and Ryan. Now, most of these can be found in either the Inglewood subdivision or the Westchester subdivision. So then we come to street names that have first and last names. So these are obviously very important to the developer to have named the street after these people. But most of them, I can't figure out who they were. I did research on each of these on the left-hand side and could not find who they were. And so maybe they were tied to Grand Prairie, and maybe anyone listening knows who these people are, and you can tell us more about it at the end. But I could not find anything on Bill Irwin, Duncan Perry, Glenn Key, Linda Key, Rosalie Seaton, Martin Barnes, or Sean Allen. So again, if you know anything about who these folks were and why they're immortalized with their own street name in Grand Prairie, I would love to know more about them. But there were 4 that are first and last names that I was able to find something out about. The first one is Bob Smith. He was the commander of NAS Dallas and later became commander of the local VFW hall. Ed Smith, he was an owner of Ed Smith Conoco at 1726 East Main Street that opened in 1960. N.J. Hardiman was a charter member of Faith Lutheran Church, and Tom Hall was a farmer in the 1930s and was on the school board in 1935. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe he's either uncle or great uncle to Lynn Motley. So then some of our Grand Prairie Historical Organization members are so blessed with streets named after them. That's pretty cool, especially, you know, to have one named after you while you're still alive. That's even more cool. So there are 5 in particular. There's England, Motley, Mildred Walker, Robertson, and Jackson. So we know that Charles England was mayor of Grand Prairie for 21 years from 1992 to 2013. Then you have Motley Street, which is named for the family of Lynn Motley. He's a descendant of Robert P. Motley, who was blessed on this earth from 1850 to 1927, and he's buried in the Motley plot in Old Southland Cemetery. Then Mildred Walker, her and her husband Ralph owned Walker's Sports Shop, and her daughter-in-law is on the line. Sammy is with us. And now the family owns the Oasis Restaurant and the Marina. Then Frake Robertson is the descendant of Buck Robertson. And then Ruthie and Georgia Jackson. Ruthie with her husband Vernon owned Jackson Vending. And I know that this little newspaper clipping that I put on here, no one can actually read that. I mean, I can't even read it from where I'm sitting, but there is a quote in here I thought was really cute. It says, "It takes only a glance at the day-to-day calendar appointments on the desk of Mrs. Vernon Jackson to see she is one of the busiest women in Grand Prairie." And I know she was the busiest woman in Grand Prairie until the day she died, and her daughter Georgia is now just as busy, carrying on the torch of her mama. So then we have some street names that I know are Grand Prairie specific historic street names. The first one is Deckman, and it's named for the man that everyone knows I talk a lot about, Alexander McRae Deckman, bought 239.5 acres of, and then another 100 acres of timberland in 1861. He filed his deed upon his return from the Civil War in 1863 with the County of Dallas, and he later established it as the town of Deckman, which is the original, it's the site of the downtown modern day Grand Prairie. Now, the interesting thing about Deckman Street is most people didn't even know it existed. It's this little tiny street that ran from I-20 going south just to not even a mile. And no one probably had even known its location, except now the carrier exit on I-20 is under construction, and so they've shut it down and opened a temporary one at Deckman. And so there's an electronic leaderboard on the side of the road saying carrier's closed, use Deckman exit. And the first time I saw that, I just kind of laughed because Deckman Street is nowhere near the original town of Deckman. Why they named that street out there for him in the middle of nowhere when it was probably named, I have no idea, but it's there and it's there to stay. So the next one is Goodwin. That street was named for Micah Goodwin, who moved his family from Alabama to what became the Watson community. He moved here in 1845. The next street is Watson Street. It's named for Patrick Alfred Watson of North Carolina, who bought land in 1853 to create the Watson community. And the Goodwins were already here. They'd been here for almost 10 years. The next street is Jordan Street, named for David Jordan, who built a home in 1845 up in what's now the Burbank Gardens area of Grand Prairie. And he moved here from Tennessee with his sons, and he's known to have brought the first slaves to this area. The next is Bowles, named for Victor Bowles, who bought the Jordan home from the Jordan's daughter, Emma Jordan Campbell, in 1886. The next street is Lively, and it's named for Stephen Philip Lively, who was elected Grand Prairie's first mayor when Grand Prairie incorporated in 1909. The next is Verneuil, and if you don't know where it's at, don't be surprised. It's not even a street that anyone lives on or any businesses are at. It's actually the driveway that leads to the pavilion at what was Cottonwood Park, now Jennifer McFalls Park. And it's off of Carrier on that side. Excuse me, off Carrier. Yeah, I said that right. So as you're driving, going northbound from Marshall, and you go down that big hill, when you arrive at the park, it's the street sign right there is Verneuil. And that's actually land that was owned by Verneuil when he had his first farm here in Grand Prairie. He then later moved down where Coles is now.
Stephanie?
But not from they're building a new Coles.
Stephanie,
Yes.
I need to interrupt.
Yes.
We got a notice that we're closing in 3 minutes.
Oh, no way. Okay. All right. We'll go through this. I'm almost done anyway. So Verneuil. Oh, also Verneuil was a business partner in a mercantile company with John Neely Bryan. And if you're originally from this area, you'll know he founded Dallas. So the next is Payne Street. J.E. Payne was the physician and surgeon. He also owned the newspaper, and his drugstore housed the Grand Prairie Telephone Company, offering services $1 a month. Next is Small Street. The Small family is buried in the Small Upchurch Cemetery, 5 Smalls and 3 Upchurches. The next one is Mose Jordan Street. Mose Jordan was a young slave who arrived in Grand Prairie with David Jordan. Fishburne was a rancher in the early 1900s. I'm just going to go through these as fast as I can. Spikes is named for the Spikes brothers, Luther, George, and JJ, who opened Spikes Broom Factory in 1912 in Dalworth Park. Turner is named for G.H. Turner, the mayor of Grand Prairie in the 1930s. He also owned a drugstore and an insurance agency. Wagner, C.P. Wagner, was the mayor of Grand Prairie in the 60s and 70s, and he not only has a street, but he also has a park named after him. W.E. Roberts was the pastor of Lighthouse Deliverance Church of God in Christ beginning in 1945. Roy Orr was the mayor of DeSoto, and he later was a Dallas County Commissioner for 10 years. Plantner is named for one of, if not all 4 of the Plantner doctors, Emil, Albert, Herman, and Don. They moved to Grand Prairie from Kansas in 1940, and their phone number was 1. And there's more I wanted to say about them, but we'll do that another time. David Daniels was hired teacher and principal of Dalworth in 1939. Fred Conover was police chief in the 1960s and 70s. And Sergeant Greg L. Hunter was a 29-year veteran of GPPD when his watch ended on June 18, 2004. So then there's some missing in action. So names that I feel like we should probably reach out and say the next street's name should be for these folks. There should be a Height Street. Robert Height was married into the Jordan family, and the Jordan family was married into the Height family.
Stephanie.
Yes.
When we get cut off, I will reschedule the meeting, but not today. I've got to fix this problem. We've got less than a minute to go.
Okay. Upchurch would be another good name. Bradshaw, he was on the very first Dallas County Commission in 1846, and he was commissioner of the West Region of Dallas. Haskett was a doctor, and he also had a general store and a stagecoach that he opened in 1872. Gotzel, he also operated